G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. On January the 26th, some people call it Australia Day, other people call it Invasion Day. I'll let you guess what I think of it. Or of course, you could have a look in my Warbles in the Wilderness playlist and get a pretty fair idea of it. But I thought I might just share with you a bit of an observation that really hit me hard yesterday when I was coming home along Yarraford Road. And I'm going to lead up to it a bit kind of gently. Like a lot of kids, my father explained to me how the world worked when I was a kid. That's me with the big ears beside the cow's ass. But my father was 52 when I was born. That's him without the hat. That's my father with the hat, and his father. So in 1968, as a kid, I watched the last working bullocks snig the last muscle-powered tree. I was kind of bred and born and raised up to be a hillbilly anachronism. When I was a little lad, the 1960s that would be, as the old man was showing me how to live, it never occurred to me that as I watched and I grew and the changes went on, so the world I was learning to live in had gone. For the old man, you see, was 52 summers older and wiser than me. 21 years ago, I published that in a book. So here's the thing. When I was a kid, my father had a mail bus run up the Furukabad Road. That's postal mail and school bus. And I noticed that there were the occasional apple tree, peach tree, European fruit tree growing on the side of the road in what they call the road reserve. It wasn't on a farm, it was between the road and the fence. And we made a couple of trips to Grafton on the old Grafton Road when I was a kid. And there was a profusion of what you'd have to call feral food plants. And Dad explained it to me that, back in the old days when it had been the first bullock track from Grafton to Glen Innes opened in 1857 to cater for the goldfields of Vegetable Creek, it used to take them 2 weeks just to go, no, 10 days on a bullock wagon just to get from the bottom of the big hill to the top of the big hill. And people would throw away apple cores, they would throw away peach stones, plum stones, pear cores, and the seeds, if they landed in a gully where there was a bit of reasonable water and the soil hadn't all eroded, they would grow. So the roads were lined with feral food plants that had built up slowly, over the 180 years or so, 200 years. And it was a really pleasant thing to see these fruiting food plants on the side of the road. And occasionally I've actually taken a ladder and gone down to the fruit trees on the side of the road between where I live and the highway. And there are several apple trees down there. And when my kids used to catch the school bus, I remember throwing an apple core and then the following year seeing that there was actually a seedling growing up there. And I've been watching the apple tree that I planted at my neighbour's front gate on the Bitumen Road, probably 20 years, maybe only 15. But yeah, this year I saw it was actually bearing an apple. Another thing that used to happen when I was a kid was every year we'd go out and we'd pick blackberries, and my parents would preserve them in glass bottles with tin plate tops. And blackberry picking was a kind of a traditional thing around here. But you see, somebody decided that sheep can't eat a blackberry, and blackberries they're profligate, you know, they cover the country. Um, on the other hand, deer and goats eat blackberry, and I use feral deer as a blackberry control. And then somebody else came up with a marvelous virus called, or a fungus it was, called blackberry rust. And they released their blackberry rust because sheep can't eat a blackberry and blackberries were declared to be illegal. And even though when my kids were young, we used to pick blackberries and take them off to the super strawberry and sell blackberries by the bucket. And I used to enjoy going and visiting friends and giving them, you know, like a 10-litre bucket of blackberries just because I had the blackberries and people like eating blackberries. It was a feral food plant, something that was introduced by the colonialists that wasn't entirely bad. Fruit trees on the side of the road, blackberries growing wild in the bad country. But for the benefit of people who think that every bit of vegetation should be edible by a sheep, otherwise it's a noxious pestilential species, they released this blackberry rust. About 15 years ago. So we'll go for a bit of a walk and I'll show you what used to be one of my biggest and most productive blackberry thickets. From about here, covering this whole windrow, was blackberry. The whole thing was blackberry. It was one giant continuous blackberry bush. I had a blackberry picker, still have got it, which my father built on the end of a broom handle. It consisted of a clamp and a guillotine, both spring loaded with levers and pull rods. But yeah, this was all my most productive blackberry bush. And because somebody reckoned they couldn't feed blackberries to their sheep, they released what they call a biological control, a rust. And the rust has completely killed my blackberries. They're just not here anymore. One of the few feral food plants that Europeans introduced into the Australian landscape, which you might have thought perhaps sort of almost went some tiny little way to redress the balance of all the wild native food plants which were fed to the hard-footed land lice. That's the correct name for sheep and cattle and horses and goats and deer and donkeys. All the other stupid bloody animals that Europeans brought here because they thought that Australia was God's forgotten continent. They didn't recognise that there was an existing ecology which actually functioned here and was highly productive. They figured they had to clear away everything Australian and replace it with something that looked like southern England after a rainy day. So here we are, walking around after one of the wettest, rainiest summers that I can recall. Where everything's growing and thriving. And as I said, I pay a bit of attention to the feral food plants on the side of the road, and I've been watching them and looking at them and thinking, yes, that looks good, isn't that good? Yes, there's going to be a lovely crop of apples this year. Feral food plants growing free for anybody to harvest. Now, I've occasionally seen people with the whole family on ladders and they've stripped an entire tree bare, but that's considered a bit rude. You know, eat your fill and not take more, lock no window, gate or door. So I've only ever taken a couple of buckets off any one tree growing wild. Right. So let's go and I'm going to show you what I saw on Yarraford Road yesterday. Cloudy day is invasion day. Okay, so I've just turned the accessories on. And the battery is still fully charged. That's the ignition going on. And now the engine started. give you a bit more of a gentle pan, and then even after starting the engine, the battery's still fully charged. So even on a cloudy Australia day, the sunfoil is still good for something. And for the likes of these, they poisoned the blackberries and killed most of the trees. And let it be said that in 26 years of owning my place, this wet summer, my next door neighbour Barilda looks the best it ever has, because it's just changed hands and it's been destocked and it's been allowed to recover during a wet, rainy spring and summer. So, while driving through the green and verdant landscape as it is at the moment, because it's been such a wonderfully good season, when you see something that's actually dead and brown and dry, it kind of sticks out. I mean, you notice it. It's not something that you can fail to see. Like this tree, which fell over across my driveway, and I was obliged to clear. So in the midst of all this greenery, when you drive it along the road, and you see that this is what has become of every fruiting feral food plant tree here on Yarraford Road, it's impossible not to notice it. And believe you me, this kind of vandalism gives me the shits. Now you'll notice that that is not a native tree, and that non-native tree is on private land on the other side of the fence, and the food plant that has been killed on both sides of the road, they're on public land. That means that whomsoever it is who wants to kill these trees before they provide free food for the population has been paid by the Glen Innes 7 Council. It's either a council employee or it's a contractor. Either way, somebody at council has decided to do this. And, you know, conspiracy theory number one is that they want the population to die out from lack of food supplies after Donald Trump gets America nuked by China and global trade ceases and there's no more refined fuel coming from Singapore to Australia and the grid fails and there's no food in the supermarket. Therefore, just to make life more interesting, some arsehole's going around killing all the feral food plants on public land. Or conspiracy theory number two is that whomsoever it was who was paid to run around spraying and killing all the noxious feral pests in the council's road reserve has decided that rather than pay attention to all the little blackberries, and they got that one, but they missed this one, what they would do is they will go and kill any non-native food plant, because, you know, that way the contractor's job would be so much easier, because, well, you just saw how much bigger an apple tree is than a blackberry sapling sucker. So in order to be able to say that they've put out more poison, they've killed this blackberry together with the peach, which I planted, as well as the apple tree, which this year promised to actually yield some apples. Because there was a blackberry underneath it, and sheep can't eat a blackberry, some cretinous arsehole has gone and killed the fruit tree. This sort of half-assed, half-witted shit is typical of everything that's wrong with Australia Day. Bloody Euro peons, everything they touch, they fuck. But when you dig down, the ultimate excuse will probably be that because my local federal member of parliament, Barney Joyce, is the Minister for Agriculture, they've killed these things to protect the world against fruit flies. Ciao.